before the sun ever learned to rise over the red earth of the savannah, before the winds whispered the secrets of the ancestors through the tall bending grasses of the wide plains, there was a village like none other, nestled at the foot of a mountain, where the spirits of the land slept beneath the stones. This village, called Yelimine, was not known for its wealth, nor its warriors, nor even its beautiful daughters. It was known for something far older, far darker, a secret so deep that the very trees refused to speak of it. Yet it was a curse that would not be ignored. They say the curse began long before the birth of Yelimane's greatest son, a man named Kofi. He was born on a night when the sky itself seemed to bend low to hear the earth's whispers. His mother, Mama Kande, said the night had been heavy with the scent of rain and the hum of the unseen. A child born of shadows and whispers, she would say, her voice trembling like the leaves before a storm. The village elders, wise and solemn, knew that Kofi's birth was marked by something strange, something ancient, though they could never speak it aloud. As Kofi grew, he became the finest hunter in the village, skilled in tracking the swiftest antelope and bending the wildest beasts to his will. His strength was undeniable, but it was his heart that drew the villagers to him. There was no one like Kofi in all of Yelimane. Yet there was one thing about Kofi that caused the elders to tremble in secret. For all his greatness, there was a darkness within him, an anger that even the strongest of spirits feared. It was said that when Kofi was angry, the ground would shake and the sky would darken as though the gods themselves had withdrawn their favor. But none feared him more than his own daughter, Afia. Afia was the light of his life, the joy in his heart, but also the one who saw the darker side of him, the side that only came out when the blood of the earth called for him. She was his only child, and he loved her with a passion that burned like the midday sun. But sometimes when Kofi looked into her eyes, he saw something that unsettled him, something almost too familiar. One evening, as the crimson sun began its descent beyond the horizon, Kofi sat alone beneath the great baobab tree, the one that stood as the silent guardian of their village. Afia approached him, her small figure outlined by the fading light. "Father," she asked softly, "why do you never speak of your own father?" The question hit Kofi like a blow to the chest. His eyes flickered for just a moment before he forced a smile. "He is gone," he replied, his voice thick with unspoken sorrow. "And what remains of him is not meant for you to know." But Afia was stubborn, and her words hung in the air like a shadow. "Is that why you're always angry?" she pressed. The wind, which had been whispering through the baobab's leaves, suddenly stilled. In that quiet, Kofi's anger flared. His eyes hardened, and for a brief, terrible moment, Afia saw the same darkness that had once consumed his father. Before she could speak again, a strange sound filled the air, like the distant murmur of thunder. Kofi's gaze lifted, his hand instinctively tightening around the handle of his spear. "Stay close, Afia," he murmured, his voice tense. A chill ran down Afia's spine. There was something wrong. Something was coming. And as the last rays of the sun bled into the earth, the wind began to howl, carrying with it a warning that would change everything. When the first stars began to gather in the sky like the scattered jewels of a forgotten crown, the village of Yelimine fell into an uneasy silence. The air was thick with the scent of rain, but no drop fell. Only the sound of the wind, low and mournful, could be heard, as if it too felt the weight of the coming night. The baobab tree, ancient and wise, stood tall and unmoving, its massive limbs reaching like gnarled fingers toward the heavens. That night, the moon was red, bright and bloodied, as though the heavens themselves had been torn open. It hung above the mountain, casting an eerie glow over the land. The people of Yelimane had seen many moons in their time, but never one like this. And so they gathered around their fires, speaking in hushed tones of the old stories, of the spirits who walked the earth on nights such as this. Kofi, however, did not sit by the fire. He paced beneath the baobab, his heart heavy with the memories he could not forget. His mind swelled with thoughts of his father, the man whose shadow had loomed over his entire life. And now, the whispers of that same darkness threatened to consume him again. He felt it in his bones, the anger building within him like a storm on the horizon. Afia, who had always been attuned to the pulse of the earth, felt it too. She could feel the restless energy in the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. Her father's mood, darkened by the rising tension, filled her with a quiet fear. She knew that something was wrong, that the spirits of the land were stirring in ways they had not in many years. As the night deepened, Afia could no longer ignore the pull in her chest, the desire to understand what haunted her father. She slipped away from the warmth of the village fire, her feet light against the cold earth, and made her way to the baobab tree where Kofi stood, his broad back silhouetted against the blood-red sky. "Mother," she called softly, her voice barely a whisper against the howling wind. Kofi turned, his face darkened by the shadows of the night. "You should be inside, Afia," he said, his tone hard, like the crack of thunder before a storm. "It is not safe." Afia's gaze was steady, though her heart raced. "What is not safe, father? What is it that you fear so deeply?" she asked, stepping closer. Kofi clenched his fists, the muscles in his arms tensing. "You should not ask about things you do not understand," he said through gritted teeth. But Afia stood her ground. "I am not a child anymore. I need to know." For a moment, there was silence, save for the wind that howled through the village. Then Kofi looked at her with eyes that burned with an ancient pain. "You want to know the truth?" he growled, stepping closer to her, his breath coming in short gasps. "The truth is that I am cursed. My bloodline is cursed, Afia." The words were like a slap across her face. She took a step back, her eyes wide with shock. "Cursed?" she whispered. But father, you've always protected us. How can it be true?" Kofi's gaze darkened, and in that moment, Afia saw the truth in his eyes, the same truth that haunted her dreams. The curse was real, and it was coming for them both. And then, just as the last of the sunlight bled from the sky, a deep, guttural roar echoed through the air. It was not the sound of any beast Kofi had ever heard, but something ancient, something alive with rage. The earth trembled beneath their feet. The curse was here. The ground beneath their feet trembled with the weight of something ancient, something powerful, like the very heartbeat of the earth itself. Kofi's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming fast, shallow, like a man who had run for days, never stopping. His eyes scanned the horizon, and the wind carried a sound that was not natural, a deep rumbling growl, almost like the earth itself was awakening from a long, cursed slumber. Afia clutched the hem of her father's cloak, her fingers trembling, though she stood as tall as she could. The blood-red moon overhead bathed the landscape in a ghastly light, casting long shadows that danced like the spirits of the dead. Every fiber of her being told her to run, but something, some force, kept her rooted to the spot. Kofi knew this sound well. It was the sound that haunted his father's deathbed, the sound that had driven his own father to madness. "Afi." Kofi's voice was raw with fear, something Afia had never heard from him before. "You must leave now. Run to the village. Do not look back." But Afia did not move. "I will not leave you, father. Whatever it is, we face it together." Kofi's hands clenched at his sides, fingers curling like the roots of the baobab tree. His daughter's bravery stirred something within him, something forgotten. "It is too late," he whispered, his voice breaking. The curse is mine to bear, mine alone." From the depths of the earth, the sound grew louder, a deafening roar that shook the very stones. Then, as if summoned by the moon itself, the ground split open, and from it rose a creature so terrifying, so unnatural, that even the winds seemed to falter. The beast was enormous, towering over the two of them like a mountain. Its skin was black as coal, its eyes glowing with a fiery red light that pierced the very soul. Its mouth, lined with teeth sharp as obsidian, opened wide, emitting a scream that sounded like the combined wail of 1,000 lost souls. Afia gasped, her body frozen with terror. But Kofi, his muscles taut, his chest heaving, stepped forward as if he were drawn by some unseen force. The creature loomed above them, its shadow swallowing them whole. "No," Kofi growled, his voice shaking with fury and despair. "This is my burden. I will face it." The beast's eyes locked onto Kofi, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The air was thick with the presence of something dark and ancient. "It is you," the creature hissed, its voice a low, guttural whisper that seemed to seep into the bones. "The blood of your father. It calls to me." Afia's heart thudded painfully in her chest as she watched her father, her protector, standing before the creature. Something so terrible, so monstrous that it felt like a living nightmare. "No, father," she cried, but her voice was swallowed by the beast's terrible growl. Kofi's eyes, once filled with strength and pride, now shimmered with a haunting sadness. "I have always known this day would come. My father's blood, my curse, I cannot escape it. I must face it." The beast let out a low chuckle, as if mocking Kofi's resignation. "You think you can fight me?" it jeered. "You are my child, Kofi. You were born of my darkness. You cannot escape what you are." The words cut through the night like a blade, and Kofi's knees trembled. He looked at Afia, his only child, his only light, and something deep within him shifted. "No," he whispered. "Not her, not Afia." Before he could stop himself, the words were out, and in that moment, the blood-red moon seemed to shimmer brighter, the world holding its breath as Kofi's destiny unfolded before him. The beast's laughter echoed in the night, dark and mocking, shaking the very foundation of the earth beneath their feet. Its massive form towered over Kofi, its eyes glowing like molten fire, its breath hot and foul, smelling of decay and forgotten things. Afia could feel the cold fingers of fear gripping her heart, her legs rooted to the earth as if she too were bound by the ancient curse that had haunted her father's bloodline. She had never seen her father so vulnerable, so broken, and yet, in the shadow of the beast, she could see the strength that had always defined him, the fierce warrior, the protector of the village. He was still there, deep beneath the surface, but something darker had taken hold. "No," Kofi said again, his voice low, trembling with defiance, yet heavy with resignation. "Not Afia. I will not let the curse take her." The creature snarled, its jagged teeth gleaming in the moonlight. "You are already mine, Kofi. Your blood is mine. You cannot protect her from the very thing that made you." Afia felt the words pierce her heart like a dagger. She had always known there was something ancient, something darker that tied her father to the land. But to hear the beast speak it aloud, to hear that the bloodline was cursed in this way, it shook her to her core. Kofi's fists clenched tighter. "I will not give you what you seek." The beast's eyes narrowed and it lunged forward, its massive claws reaching out to grab Kofi. In that moment, Afia saw a flash, a glimpse of the old man, the man her father used to be, the man who had fought to protect the village. She had seen it in his eyes before, but now she saw it more clearly than ever. The curse had been handed down through generations, passed from father to son, like a shadow that would never fade. But Kofi had never truly believed that it could be broken. His father had tried to escape it, and so had his grandfather. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of that darkness lifting, just enough to see a flicker of hope. "Kofi!" Afia cried, stepping forward, her voice full of the strength she had inherited from him. You are not alone. The curse ends with you. At her words, something shifted in Kofi. It was as though a veil had been torn away from his eyes, revealing a path that had always been there, but had been too clouded by pain and anger to see. The beast recoiled slightly, sensing the change, its now faltering. For the first time, Kofi looked at his daughter, not with the eyes of a father who was burdened with the past, but with the eyes of a man who saw a future that did not belong to the curse. You are right, Kofi whispered, his voice breaking. The curse ends with me. As the words left his mouth, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble again, but this time it was not the roar of the beast. This was something different, something ancient. It was the power of the earth itself, of the ancestors who had watched over the land for centuries, stirring to life in response to Kofi's defiance. The moon, once red as blood, began to shift. The shadows that had long haunted Yelimane began to recede, like the darkness retreating before the dawn. Kofi's body glowed with an inner light, as if the very spirit of the land had awakened within him. The beast snarled again, but there was fear in its voice now. You think you can defy me? You are mine, Kofi. You always have been. But Kofi, his voice steady now, replied with a force that came from deep within. I was never yours. I belong to the land, to my daughter, to this village, and today I end this curse. In that moment, the earth responded, and a crack, deep and powerful, split open beneath the beast's feet. The creature howled in agony, but his voice was drowned by the rising hum of the earth itself, as if the spirits of the ancestors were shaking the very foundations of the world to right a wrong that had spanned generations. Kofi raised his spear, not as a warrior, but as a man who had reclaimed his soul. With one final thunderous roar, the beast was consumed by the earth, sinking into the cracks from which it had come. And when the earth fell still again, Kofi stood, his chest heaving, his eyes filled with a new hard-won peace. Afia stepped forward, her voice soft as she spoke the words that would forever mark the end of the curse. The bloodline is free. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling gold and pink across the savannah like a blanket of warmth that kissed the earth awake. The blood-red moon, now fading into the distance, left behind a sky that seemed clearer, as though the very heavens had been scrubbed clean. The winds had calmed, and the earth itself seemed to breathe easier, as though the ancient weight had finally been lifted. Kofi stood alone beneath a baobab tree, the mighty trunk that had witnessed generations of stories, struggles, and triumphs. The ground where the beast had once stood was now silent, the scar it had left upon the earth slowly healing, as if the land itself had forgiven the trespass of the darkness. Afia approached him slowly, her feet light against the soft soil, her eyes searching for the father she thought she had lost to the curse. She had feared this night would break him, would take him from her forever. But as she looked at him now, she saw something different, a quiet strength, a peace that radiated from him like the warm rays of the rising sun. Father, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Is it over? Kofi turned to her, his eyes softening as they met hers. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply stood there, taking in the dawn, the life around him. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with a deep, weary wisdom. It is over, Afia, he said. The curse is broken, but it is not enough to simply end it. We must live differently now. We must live in a way that honors the land, the ancestors, and the promise of new beginnings. Afia nodded, understanding his words in a way she hadn't before. They stood together in the quiet of the morning, their hearts full as the sounds of the village waking up began to fill the air. Children laughing, elders greeting the new day with their steady voices, and the birds singing songs that seemed to celebrate the renewal of the world itself. The villagers, sensing the change, began to gather around the baobab tree. They had felt the tremor in the earth, the darkness that had passed, and they knew deep within their bones that something profound had happened. The curse that had shadowed them for so long was no more. Kofi's voice, steady and firm, carried across the crowd as he spoke. The beast is gone. The darkness has lifted. But we must remember that the land speaks to us as it always has. We must listen and we must honor it. Afia stepped forward, her heart full of pride and love for her father. The curse ends with us, she said, her voice strong. But a new legacy begins, one of healing, of understanding, of balance. The villagers cheered, their voices rising like the wind across the plains, carried on the breath of ancestors who had always known this day would come. They sang, they danced, and they gave thanks to the earth, to the spirits, and to the great baobab tree that had witnessed it all. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its light over the village, Kofi and Afia stood side by side, knowing that the trials of the past had forged them into something stronger, something unbreakable. The curse was gone, the land was free, and together, father and daughter would lead Yelimani into a new era, one of hope, renewal, and deep connection to the earth that had always been their greatest teacher. And as the last of the village's children ran to join the circle of celebration, Afia glanced up at her father, her heart soaring. "We are free," she said softly. Kofi nodded, his voice a quiet murmur. "Yes, Afia, we are free." And with that, the day began anew, one full of promise, a day that would be remembered forever as the day the curse was broken. If you've enjoyed this tale of redemption, strength, and the breaking of ancient chains, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories that carry the wisdom of our ancestors. Share this tale with those who need to hear it. And remember, our stories are our power. Stay tuned for more journeys through the heart of Africa, where every legend has a lesson and every tale leads us home.